Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app. Hub24 is on a mission to empower advisors to deliver better financial futures for their clients. They are dedicated to customer service excellence and delivering innovative product solutions that create value for advisors and their clients. These are just some of the reasons why advisors rate them number one for overall satisfaction and why their managed portfolio solution has been rated best in market 5 years running. Hub24 believes nothing happens in isolation. So they're working together with advisors, licensees, and industry leaders to leverage their data and technology expertise to help solve key challenges in the delivery of financial advice, so more Australians can access cost-effective advice. Welcome back to the XY Advisor Podcast. I'm Fraser Jack, and today I'm joined by Jordan Vaka. Welcome.
Thank you, Fraser. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming on. Let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your practice at the moment.
Sure. My practice is PlanningSolo. We're a small firm. We focus on helping people going through divorce and helping them rebuild afterwards as well. And also we're looking at helping people through, bigger life transitions as well.
Fantastic. And of course, you're an independent financial advisor, which we'll get into shortly. But before we go there, let's follow your journey. Tell us about where it all started for you.
Yeah, sure. I came out of university, started working at a smaller boutique firm, wound up at one of the big banks. For all of the pros and cons of the banks, they're a very good learning environment, or they were a very good learning environment. Lots of meetings every day. Went from there into a stockbroking firm where I was the advisor in there. That was fun when the GFC hit. I still remember all the phones ringing with the margin calls for all the stockbrokers. And then at 25, had the brainwave of setting up my own business and going out on my own and pushed through that. And merged with another larger firm a few years ago, had a really great time with them. But we parted ways last year, partly so I could head towards that independent goal. And now here we are.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a very quick overview. Now tell me about the fact that, you went out and got your qualifications at uni. What did you get?
I have a Bachelor of Commerce with a major in financial planning.
Yeah, wow. So all like you were one of the ones that didn't just fall into this. You actually went out and studied it and wanted to become. Why did you choose that?
I actually always had the ambition of becoming a lawyer, and then I realized that I enjoyed economics and finance too much at school. So went into commerce, didn't really know which way I would head, and I think I was in a fundamentals of finance class, and I came across what financial planning was. And it seemed like a really good overlap between the theoretical side of finance, where it's all about the numbers and spreadsheets, and actually helping people individually. And that's kind of what I fell in love with at first. And then as I went through the education, the complexity probably kept me going, I think. I think learning the superannuation rules 4 times in 15 years has kept things pretty fresh. So, yeah, that's what sparked the interest initially.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I, as you say that, I think about the combination of the technical side and the emotional side, and having that balance, to be able to think about a situation from both the technical aspect and then the client's emotional needs.
Yeah, it definitely keeps it interesting, and it is quite a complex job what we do. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, certainly plenty to keep you interested. Talk to me about then your first job. How did you land a job in the bank?
So I started off doing admin at a smaller firm for about 6 months, and that was really, I don't think I realized the benefits of that until much later on, when you're actually in the nuts and bolts of getting an application in and chasing through underwriting and that sort of thing. But then, just applied and wound up in a role at Westpac. Yeah, and just ran with it from there. I think I was there for 2 or 3 years.
Tell me about that experience starting with a bank, and then, because obviously back in those days, that's where all the training was. I guess there was a big training, learning curve to be done. You could shadow some people. They would give you some training. Forget about the advice and the product. Like, we're not there to talk about that, but just talk to us about the training aspect and how that set you up.
Yeah, in hindsight, the investment they put into training is significant. And as you say, the motivations are obviously something we won't talk about. But I remember we did 6 weeks of training off-site in a group, and that was from everything. A lot of it was obviously very product-based to get to know your product. And I think there were accreditations involved you had to pass to know your product back then. But also how to run a meeting, how to position a meeting, how to position your services, how to structure advice. There was strategic education as well. Through that, we were then put out into the branches, and I was partnered with a senior advisor, and we would meet up once or twice a week. But it was still me on my own in those first few meetings, and I shudder to think how they must have gone. They were either really quick or really long. I can't quite remember. And then they had ongoing training through the process as well. Every week, every fortnight you'd catch up with your peers. Every week there'd be discussions. So it was a very intensive way to learn. But there was always that background hum of sales and leaderboards and targets and things like that. And I think that experience kind of left me wondering where I fit into the picture, because that side of things I realize now is just of no use when it comes to motivating me. I don't really care about a lot of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's that's a culture that comes with product sales, and obviously banks have got product that they need to distribute, and let's not bash them for that. But that's the culture for any particular larger organisation that has shareholders and needs to sign on new clients on new bank accounts, whatever it might be, new mortgages. Talk to me about that process of, like, with the training. You go through that training with you get to sit. Do you see that now in the professional year? Is that a similarity, or are we just sort of missing some of that stuff with how the new year might look?
Yeah, I find the professional year quite an interesting concept. I think done well, it could go beyond, it could surpass what we had in the past, what I went through. I worry about the resourcing that the firms that are doing the PY are going to have to bring to bear to do it, and whether or not that'll create a gap between the potential and the reality. At the bank, ultimately, they didn't really spare any expense because you were part of the onboarding process. They had the infrastructure in place to align you with a senior partner or senior planner and technical resources to train you up. In a smaller firm, a PY is something that's in the back of my mind for our firm. The resourcing around that is something I need to get my head around, and how we can adequately do that. Because I think that next generation coming in, ultimately, that's the legacy those of us that are still in the game will be leaving behind. And I don't want us to stuff that up.
Yeah. And how old were you when you were coming through that banking channel?
I was 22.
And how did you go sitting in front of clients and talking about retirement? And was there moments there where you're questioning yourself as to, do you deserve to be there?
Yeah, I think the imposter syndrome was pretty strong. I think parroting the lines that we were given helped a lot. But no, absolutely, yeah, you're scared out of your wits.
And how did you get past that? What'd you tell yourself?
I think it was a bit of bluff and bluster, really. I think knowing that the bank system's very easy to criticize, but knowing that personally we were coming at it with the right intent, that we were trying to help improve people's situation, and that helped a lot. And also being quite open with the fact, being prepared to say, look, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll come back to you with it. I think that's a very powerful sentence to use. And it took me a while to learn that one. But yeah, you just bluff through it ultimately and hope that you can clean up any mess afterwards.
Yeah, exactly right. And you're right, we're not here to bash the banks. In fact, I think a lot of people have stuff in place now because of that process and system that they probably wouldn't have otherwise had. Talk to me about the stockbroker days, because you moved from a bank to a stockbroker pre-GFC. Everything's going swimmingly well. Stocks are only going up. They only ever go up, don't they? Don't they? Tell us about that moment where you were the financial planner with a group of let's say bolstering stockbrokers.
So I am trying to keep my positive hat on, Fraser, but we're ticking a few of the boxes on the way through.
Just trying to wind you down, grind you down a little bit.
Look, I'll be honest. I'm mystified at the way stockbroking is treated and seen from a regulatory point of view. I think that the complexity of the work that we do on our side of the fence, I don't see why the rules are sort of managed a bit differently. But even that aside, I think for a certain clientele, for a certain group of people, a stockbroker is a fantastic addition to their wealth approach. I don't think it should be in isolation. And I think that the intellectual or the theory that we are seeing develop over years does bring into question the value of the model that they're currently operating through. So we were sort of in the middle there of them. The firm I was in were transitioning across to more of a wealth management approach, where it was essentially financial advice. They were trying to bring in the assets under management, charge a percentage on that rather than charging brokerage. I think that was quite an interesting model, and I believe they've continued with that a bit. But then the GFC hit and everything fell apart, essentially. we had brokers not come in for days, so we were taking the margin calls and just passing on the messages. There's nothing more we could do. We had clients selling down. The firm that I was in, they were heavy into Babcock and Brown. They were heavily into Allco, companies that just wiped out. ABC Learning was a huge part of the practice. So that was just horrifying for me, the idea of margin calls spiraling down for people over time, when most of us listening will probably be of the opinion that buy and hold is a really good strategy rather than over-leveraging and punting. So it was eye-opening. It definitely displayed some of the distinctions between our approach and what I'd be learning on the side compared to what I was experiencing in the day-to-day. Yeah, it was a fascinating experience. It's not one I'd necessarily want to repeat, though.
No, it's a very difficult process to get up in the morning and go to work when you know what's coming. Tell me about your state of mind at the time going through that and talking to those clients and not being able to really do anything.
I think it was irritation was a big part of it because these weren't our clients. None of our clients in our little financial planning pod had margin calls. All of our clients were sitting tight. We were buying, if anything, we were buying into Macquarie in the $20 and $30 point. That was fun. Like, that's exciting. It's nerve-wracking because you're trying to hold on to the theory, thinking it'll get you through as the world melts around you. But then having to spend a good part of my day on the phone to lenders chasing margin calls and then having to leave messages for people or send emails to people for clients because the brokers had just disappeared. Yeah, it was pretty frustrating. It was quite irritating.
And like working with those brokers, do they? I guess they eventually showed up. What did that ruin your relationship with them?
Yeah, I didn't stay at the firm much longer after the GFC. I think I set out on my own 9 months into it.
Yeah,
I think maybe I was in my mid-20s, so a big part of it was, if I couldn't do it much worse, which is the arrogance of youth, of course.
Yeah, of course. Now, so how old were you when you started your own firm?
I was 25.
Yep. So 25 years old, starting your own firm. How did you start it? Obviously, you had some relationships, existing clients, or did you just out of the what was the plan? What was the game plan?
I think the game plan and the reality diverged pretty quickly. I think my experience is a really good example of how not to do it. I went out with a handful of clients, they were wonderful, and they're still with me, which was fantastic. That really helped in the early days. But I was undercapitalized. I didn't have the referral sources I should have had. And it was a really hard slog for 3 years, just meeting people and acquiring clients very slowly. I partnered up with a really good finance broker early on, but negotiated myself into a terrible revenue splitting deal where very quickly every deal was losing money. I ticked every box on the mistake checklist for 3 years. It was very educational, Fraser.
Well, this is why this story is so important, because it helps other people avoid similar mistakes. So 25, starting your own practice, I call this the apprenticeship stage when you start your own business, and everybody thinks you can start a business, and that's great. You can have some runway, but go back to the idea of starting a first year apprenticeship wages for the first year at least, and then and maybe they'll double every year until you get something that resembles a real job. Did you just sort of set this up to start your own job, or was this setting up a business?
I think the plan was to set up a business. The 5-year plan was to bring myself out of the front line and try to hire other staff. Those delusions, they turned out to be delusions, and that arrogance was punctured very quickly. And it became a matter of survival's too extreme a term, but really just getting by for the 3 years while we built the foundations and recovered from some of my mistakes. That arrogance I mentioned earlier, it's very hard to maintain that when you have to move back home with mum to get by as you're running a business. So that blew all that out of the water. It was horrible at the time, horrible. But in hindsight, it's made me a much better advisor and a much better business person now, I think, and a better person, to be frank.
Yeah, Lan, look, I think you'll probably look at, when you listen back to this podcast, or if you do, you'll realize that all of those different experiences turned you into the human that you are today. It's not easy. Like you said, you've been trained to the banks, and you've been through through some adversity within the GFC, and you call it arrogance, but you've got to have a bit of confidence in yourself to back yourself to do these things and start your own business. Tell me about that merger with the because it's always people sort of give you that idea you need to have a referral partner, and you need to set it up where you do these things, and you're getting this information from outside sources that are saying you should be doing this. Tell me about that relationship you set up with the broker.
So I sent out 150 cold letters to finance brokers in my area, in my sort of part of Melbourne. And I had 3 responses. 2 of them were people that you do not really want to do business with. And one of them was somebody that was really good to do business with. And we started working together. I think there was maybe a mismatch in expectations, in terms of the level of salesmanship that I would be bringing to the role. I've never been terribly good at sales. And there was that bit of a clash there. But on the whole, he had a wonderful group of clients. He approached it really well, and he was really generous with his time and with his clients. But signing up to a 50-50 revenue split, if anybody's considering that, I would strongly discourage you in doing so, particularly in the new world.
Yeah, it's it's sort of not a thing that you can really do in the new world at all. But back then it was probably fairly ambitious. But was that something because did you sign up to that because you were struggling to win or get new clients in, and that wasn't part of your personal values?
Yeah, absolutely not. It wasn't part of the initial plan. It was a matter of, well, here's a source of clients of people that I can help, and bring revenue into the business. And it did meet that purpose. For that 2 to 3 years, it was a very productive relationship, and it let me springboard into a few other areas. And then when that relationship did come to an end, we're able to keep rolling on, which was something I'll be really grateful for forever, I think. Yeah,
and tell me about that ending of the relationship. That's obviously a difficult a time to any relationship difficult to end, and of course you know that with your current business called PlanningSolo, talking about divorce. But any relationship difficult to end. So tell me about ending that business relationship.
It sort of died on the vine, to be completely honest. He, I think, lost a bit of confidence in the way that I was doing it because I wasn't upselling hard enough. I wasn't pushing the envelope hard enough in some of the strategies we were doing. I am by nature a fairly conservative person. My bias is towards keeping things simple, and I think that was a bit of a clash. And so the client flow dropped off, the flow of clients dropped off. I generated or developed other relationships that were proving to be a bit more aligned. And so it sort of just drifted away until eventually we just stopped. Yeah, it was a bit of a shame, but I think it had run its course.
Yeah, so looking at these 2 businesses, your business, his business on paper looked like they were a good match, but just your personal values were not aligned to his personal values, and that's where the relationship broke down.
Yes, yeah, and I think, the story that we've told so far, I think there is a consistency there in that I often felt like I wasn't a good fit for the role that I was in because my values, I guess, as you'd put it, or my approach didn't really align with what they wanted. And it took me a long time to come to that realization, to be honest. I always thought there was something wrong with me, that I just wasn't cut out to be that kind of successful advisor. And then I did some work with a really great coach who I think you may have spoken to, Baz Gardner. And he set me straight on that, which was really, really, really beneficial.
Yeah, fantastic. And this is a really interesting part and Baz is certainly somebody who does get deeply into these, understanding your own values and then taking ownership of them and just saying, there is no right or wrong. Everybody's own values are right. And once they get to know them and understand them, then they can really use those to their advantage and just forget about the stuff that's not aligned, because you'll end up attracting clients. If you're honest and open and authentic about it, you'll end up collecting or attracting clients that are also aligned to your values, and you'll start enjoying your work. So tell me about what happened after that. You mentioned that you had developed some other relationships with more people that were more aligned to you.
So another finance broker who did a lot of work in the first homeowner space. So he was quite an inspirational guy, actually. So I got a lot out of working with him. In Melbourne, we have very largely suburbs out on the periphery that involves a lot of commuting back and forth. So I was working with clients in that space, a lot of time on the road, but just really great to be able to help people get that first step. They've just bought a house. We could make sure that everything else was tidied up and in the right place. So that was a fantastic relationship. He was a really great bit of a mentor, actually. And also over time came to meet the person who became my business partner.
Fantastic. And tell us about deciding that you're going to have an actual business partner.
I feel like I'm not really sticking to the normal narrative of business owners here, Fraser, but I was tossing up whether or not I should get out of it completely or keep going. A large part of that was just that value clash that I kept feeling. I just kept feeling that I was not cut out to be a successful advisor by all the measures of success that I kept seeing. And then my licensee at the time put me in touch with Brian Jones, who now runs VA Platinum. And we hit it off and we got to talking. And I was either going to sell or I was going to buy. And he opened my eyes to the third option, which was to merge with his practice. And we did that. His business was a lot larger than mine, but it really opened up the opportunities for us to talk to different people and bring different approaches to our work. And it was just a really fruitful and beneficial partnership for me, definitely, I know.
And how do you merge a business that's complete? I mean, I guess no two businesses are the same size ever when you're looking at doing a merger, but how did you go through that process of working out a merger? Because, I mean, it's very easy to just turn around and go, oh, well, we'll go 50-50 or we'll just merge at the same levels and you will be a major and a minor shareholder. But talk us through the pros and cons of the conversations that you had to weigh up, how you can do it.
One of the benefits I had is that Brian is an incredibly commercially minded person with an extreme approach to fairness. And I don't think that combination is very common. So I was very lucky in that regard. So we just looked at our revenue figures for the last 2 years. We took an average and we allocated percentages in a new entity based on that.
Yep.
And this, if anybody's thinking about merging or any sort of operation like this, we had a conversation very early on about exit strategies and how the partnership would be dissolved and how we would approach it, knowing that every business relationship runs its course. And that turned out really beneficially because that's exactly how it played out.
Yeah, as do most or almost every single business. When you set up that equity split in the new venture, did you have options to sort of look at purchasing and share transfer over time?
Yes. Yeah, we did. We had it set up so that I could buy up more over time. That didn't come to pass because of our friend Commissioner Hayne. Yep.
Our good friend. So tell us about the business then. So that ran its course. How long was that? How long were you in partnership for?
I think it was nearly 3 years. But yeah, in the middle of those 3 years was the Royal Commission. It was an acquisitive model, so we were buying other practices and rolling them up into our business, which I think that aggregator approach was very practical back then. We had grandfathered revenue, we had large risk practices, we were rolling it up and it was working really well. And then obviously the Royal Commission happened and definitely a positive process, I think. But it meant that the grandfathered revenue was valued down and all the dominoes fell from there. So it really had us review what we were doing.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so the idea of just picking up a few, were they C&D books or were they just whole books?
It was a mixture. A few were whole businesses, retiring advisors that we just dropped in. There are quite a few C&D books. It was a great strategy. I think it's worked for quite a few practices and it worked for us. It's just we hit the brick wall of, the new world.
Yeah, fantastic. In the capacity of the new rules. Tell me about that. Like, what tips would you give to somebody now thinking about buying a business or adding a book to their, to bring in some additional revenue? What tips would you give them? Yeah,
I think it's a really interesting proposition. I think on the one hand, do it. The revenue calculation stacks up really well, particularly with current interest rates. If you can have a really good first look at the book beforehand to sort out the quality, that's really important. I've seen some differential pricing where certain levels of fees are valued at a different ratio, which makes a lot of sense. Personally, I think that this is probably going to get me in trouble. I think financial advising fees, so your ongoing fees, I don't think they're worth anything anymore. I think the fact that you need to get them renewed every 12 months, 24 months, brings us back to the market of accountants. But if people out there see it differently, you can see some tension in the market, which is really good. On the other side, I do wonder could you acquire a client base? Let's say you're spending 30 grand a year in interest on buying a book. If you diverted that 30 grand a year towards marketing or something else, could you acquire a client base that was directly in line with your values and your approach for the same money? Not at the same, you don't have the same immediate revenue uplift, but is that a viable alternative? I think it might be.
Yeah, and you can tell where I'm going to go with this next sort of line of questioning in the fact that you're absolutely right, because when it comes to acquiring a book, if you haven't then started with your own, values and niche and target market, and you're acquiring a book that's outside of that, then you're probably acquiring a whole lot of additional years of, pain or years of things that might then you might turn around and go, well, then none of these are actually my target client. What am I doing? So it might be a short-term solution,
yes,
but not necessarily a long-term solution. So tell me about the business, because then you finished up with that relationship. How did that end?
We both decided to go in different directions. Brian was working in VA Platinum, which is just going gangbusters. He's running a great operation over there. I'm still a client of his through VA Platinum. I have a wonderful VA that just keeps our business ticking. And he was obviously more interested in that area. I was more interested heading down the independent path and building out the practice exactly like we just spoke about, really, marketing towards our ideal group of clients. So we just came to the decision to sell. We found a buyer who was very open to the idea, went ahead with it. It was done within a few months, I believe, and
And that sale process was reasonably good, or everything went smoothly?
Yes. Yeah, no, it was very, very good. The group that bought us had done a lot of acquisitions in the past. And one of our conditions was that we wanted somebody to buy the business and take our staff with us. So we had 3 or 4 VAs at the time who had been with us the whole time I was there and with Brian for years beforehand, and we wanted to make sure they kept a role. We also had another advisor who was very good, and we wanted to make sure he kept a role. And we found a buyer that did all of that. It was wonderful, actually. It was a great outcome.
Yeah. Was that within your existing license?
No, it's outside of our license, yeah.
Tell us about moving to a new license through a sale transition process. Was that difficult, or was it,
The buyer was self-licensed, so I think that helped a great deal.
Yep.
And our licensee had a lot of experience with this. Because we had bought a lot of books, we knew the team quite well, the transitions team. So they made it a lot easier. We had an office manager on shore here who was the most diligent and detailed person I've ever met. Without her, we couldn't have done it. And yeah, it actually, from my perspective, it went quite smoothly. Brian and Mindy might have a different perspective, but from my end, it was very easy.
Fantastic. And did you remain in the new business?
No, completely out.
So how did you pitch to them that you were going to still be an advisor but sell your business?
I think the approach, the avenue we were heading down of focusing on helping people through divorce helped a lot. And also I bought out the group of clients that I wanted to keep working with out of the business.
Yeah.
And so I just made a very clear line. I said, I'll sign anything you want. I have no interest in pitching across to the other company. We're here to help. And we have helped, over the last 12 months with any queries they might have had. So I think it was a leap of faith by them, but it was also just me making sure I don't want to rip anyone off. I can't be bothered.
Yeah, it's your commitment, right? It's your commitment and your name within the profession. So that's what you wanted to keep up.
Mm.
Now that leads us to your target market. Why, where, how, did you decide that this was where you wanted to be?
So going back to that work I did with Baz, what he made me realize was that all the things that I thought were wrong with me as an advisor, I was too cynical. I wasn't salesy enough. I went too overboard with clients. He said, no, actually they're talents and their strengths. They're just not applicable within the usual model. So, that cynicism, really, it's skepticism that we bring to situations to protect our clients. That going overboard with clients is because I like to protect them through a process. And that was a really eye-opening experience. And the next step of that was working out, well, who are my favorite clients? And it was something like 8 out of my top 10 favorite clients, not by value, but just favorite people that I love to meet with, were divorced women. And that opened the door to exploring, okay, why is that? Eventually I realized that the work that sounds really silly because I run my business and it's how I support my family, but the profit and revenue side of the business I've never really given two hoots about. If the work is really boring and has no meaning, then I don't really care what the fee is. It's not really going to be enough for me to get interested. So if I can find work that is meaningful, creates an impact in people's lives and has some complexity around it, then that's going to get me up every morning. That, coupled with the divorced clients, led me down this path, and I realized that there's a lot we can do to help unsure or inexperienced people through the financial side of their divorce. And that's proven to be the case, which has been very fortunate.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, protecting people, I note the words you said, protecting people through a process or a transformation, and to solve their problems on the way through that and to help them move from one thing to another, lights you up inside as a human. And therefore, if you can turn that into a profitable business model, it's also, it's the win-win for you.
It is. And it did. I have thought a lot about the business and how I want it to look. And I think it's probably a bit different than the traditional planning approach. So, for instance, we don't have ongoing clients. We don't have ongoing service arrangements in our business. We work to projects and engagements. Now, for some clients, those engagements may be rolling 12-month engagements, but each one will be different. Each one will be tailored to their needs that year. So I see our business as almost more aligned with a barrister's business model, where there will be no capital value, there will be no asset to sell ultimately, rather than the traditional planning model with the 3 times a figure in the background.
Yeah, that's incredible. So talk to me about that concept of that mindset that you put yourself through to say, I'm not building a business to sell anymore. I'm building a business that's going to, I'm going to really, really enjoy working in, and maybe another person who's like you will be just as enjoy working in it or coming in or taking it over. No asset to sell.
Yeah, and look, no small part of that is driven by a real distaste for FDSs. I'll be completely honest. I don't like doing them, but also I was really influenced by Jim Stackpool's approach of that rolling project engagement idea. That played a big part in my thinking. But also, commercially, it means that every job you do needs to be profitable, which is a good discipline to have as well. It's not a discipline I always had in the past, because the idea was, well, we'll take a loss on the upfront, but we'll pick it up on the back end. That's not really an option for us anymore. It's just a matter of we get the value out of the work that we do for people. I don't think we will have any clients for life. I think we'll have people that drift in and out of their lives over time. We have a big project at the moment that we're about to start, which is how do we create that community of people that we've helped? So we're not going to have a big book of clients that we service, but I want to have a huge cloud of people that we have helped in some way or another that we stay in touch with, that as their needs pop up, we're the person they call or we're the group they call. So it's not a complete separation from the traditional model, but just a bit of a tweak, I think.
Yeah, so to me, that's keeping the relationship, but not the financial relationship or the working relationship. You just keep the relationship, and with you and your staff and your brand and those sorts of things, and the community.
Yeah, and it's how do we do that cost effectively, as a business, but also effectively for the people that we're talking to. I mean, we all have newsletters we unsubscribe from all the time. I don't want that to be us. But it's a bit of a tightrope, and we'll experiment and we'll play around with that, and I'm looking forward to getting that one off the ground.
Yeah, that is an interesting project. Now talk to me about Jim's projects and engagement. What did you learn from that, and how did you go about transforming your business into a projects and engagement style business rather than, it's too easy, this is the way we've always done it, traditional planning firm?
Well, I have our friend Commissioner Hayne to thank for a large part of it, I think. Him and his team applied the blowtorch to the status quo of the way we did things. And it made me really revisit it, particularly because in the business we were in, we were doing it the traditional way, and it didn't blow up on us, but it got really hard. That's not the way the wind was blowing. So that sort of triggered the reevaluation of how we work. And then I've been following Jim's stuff for a long time. I think he's been ahead of the curve for a lot of years. And it just makes sense. We are there to help them address the complexities in their life and help them improve the odds of achieving their aspirations. That isn't going to be achieved by 1% on farm every year. It needs to be aligned with their specific work. And if there's a year where we're not going to do much for clients, we don't charge them very much. It is directly aligned to the work that and the value that we add. And I like it. It just makes it a lot easier. It means that my fee calculator, my job sheet calculator is horrendously complex, and I can never share it with anyone because it's just a mess. But it works, and it stacks up really well, I think.
Fantastic. And do you go through that fee calculator with your clients?
No. So we'll have our initial meeting, our exploration meeting, where we scope out what they're looking for and how we think we can help. We then prepare a proposal that outlines our understanding of what they're looking to do, the services we believe should be priorities over the term of the engagement, and then the fees that are associated with that, or our costs. We use that terminology now.
Professional costs. I love it.
Professional costs. We changed the heading in our proposal thanks to that. I believe that's from you, isn't it?
I think I did, it wasn't me originally. I think I saw it somewhere and repurposed it. So yep. But I do like saying that. Change from fees to professional costs.
So we don't show the actual calculation in the background because there's quite a lot to it, but we just show the figure, and then we divide that across the term of the engagement.
Yeah, fantastic. And so that's in the second meeting, and then they either do or don't go ahead, and then you go ahead and scope out the project.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And inside that's all then the advice, and then the implementation all becomes part of the project.
Exactly. And we're finding that in year one, we do quite a lot of work. In year two, there's generally less work. It's more just, okay, how are things tracking along? Part of that's our investment philosophy. We're very much in the passive group. But then year 3 and 4, there tends to be a bit more, we start talking to the broader family. We start talking to, different groups. So it's been a good pattern.
Yeah, fantastic. And so talk to me about I want to get to the independent thing in a minute, but the marketing side of that. So changing creating a new name, working out exactly who you want to work for. Exciting time, I guess. New business concept, new idea, new marketing. Tell us about that. What work you put into that?
I had a friend tell me early on in the process that he was a bit jealous of it because we were essentially starting up again, and I think that's fun when you start up. So which was nice of him to say. A lot of thought went into it. Having the hard part was working out what made me happy in the work. And that's where that work with Baz, and I keep returning to that because that really paid off. Knowing the 3 or 5 things that really made me happy with my work made the rest a lot easier. It made it easier to say no to certain work. Let me focus down on this niche and really drill into that and have the confidence to go out to family lawyers and say, look, I don't really know how we can help. How do you think we can help? And rolling on from there. So in terms of marketing and that, a lot of it was just that research piece that we did for the first 6 months, even under the old company. And then I like writing, so I write a lot of stuff. And that's I put it out mainly through LinkedIn or my blogs. And that has driven a lot of activity, actually. LinkedIn has been a really good opportunity to go and meet other professionals, not just family lawyers, and talk about what we do. And that's been a really great source of clients and of work. And our blogs and our website. I try to follow SEO a little bit, but it's complicated. So I just throw a huge amount of words out there, and it seems to be working out pretty well.
Yeah, fantastic. It's also you're letting the algorithms pick up those words and deliver them to the right people. So you write a lot of blogs. Then obviously you can get to send those to family lawyers and other referral sources or people that work in and around what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been quite useful as well. And I think they've come across a lot of our stuff. Shifted a bit to just doing long form posts on LinkedIn, and that's generating a lot of conversations, through messaging and things like that, and just building out that network, slowly.
That's a really interesting point you mentioned just then. Slowly, you can. I always say this with podcasting too. You can be an overnight success in 2 or 3 years from now, if you're just consistent. If you're just consistent with this sort of stuff. How long had you been, creating long form blogs and posts before you really sort of that some traction happening?
Easily 2 years. Easily. Yeah. And that's pretty actively building the network as well, putting stuff out a few times a month, making a lot of mistakes. But yeah, at least 2 years. And I think there's a lot more upside for us left as well.
Yeah, of course. And how much of that then was local to your region or area versus being able to sort of work around the country?
So one of the blessings I had partnering up with Brian is he already had the business set up with a VA structure and working remotely. So there wasn't an office. We all worked from home. At the time, it was a real shift for me. It was really weird. But then COVID hit, and all of a sudden the way we were working was sort of the norm. So we've been set up. We have clients across the country. We have clients we communicate with all different formats. That's been our normal for the last couple of years. So COVID, in terms of our business operations, didn't really have an impact.
Fantastic. And talk to me about because you've gone down the independent financial advisor route. Tell us about why that was and where that started for you.
So I'm starting to realize how many of my business decisions have been driven by annoyance. It always annoyed me that...
Sorry, this is not a podcast. This is a therapy session. Thank you for coming.
Just how powerful irritation is as a motivator in my life.
Yeah.
It always annoyed me that I couldn't call myself independent. It was, that's a silly thing, right? Like the advice I give and the advice most people give is independent in form, if not by the law. But it always irked me. It always bothered me. And then as the more I looked into the Section 923A definition of independence and what it could mean and how it can work as a business, it really attracted me. It really attracted me, the simplicity of it. And I know it's a big shift from the traditional way of operating. I'd had the benefit of already deciding I wasn't going to take insurance commissions anymore. And I wrote a few blogs around that on LinkedIn to try to just articulate that in my mind. So I'd already crossed that bridge. So the next shift was really, okay, I need to change to my own license because I can't call myself independent under a license where anybody is receiving a commission. And so that's what we did. I applied for the license, got it within 30 days at the start of this year, and we're off and running.
Yeah, wow. And tell us that process, was that, did you engage somebody to do that for you or did you?
I didn't. I did it myself. I think that might be some control tendencies perhaps, but I wanted to make sure that I read the pack and I read all the background RGs and covered off on all the compliance work myself before we put it in. Honestly, when you account for the time that I put in, it probably would have been cheaper to engage somebody. but it's left me a lot more confident around the process and our obligations and responsibilities as a licensee.
Yep. And has that changed any of the processes within the business itself that you're performing, as apart from the independent thing, but the fact that you're now the responsible manager? And
it's put some blocks in my diary of time that weren't in there before, just reviewing, DDO that came out, like just that ridiculousness. I've had to review that and go through all that. But if anything, in terms of our operations or advice, it's simplified it. It's made it a lot clearer of what was maybe surplus in our systems from before and we could cut out. So that's been quite liberating.
Yeah, great. Okay. Now, so tell us about the independent part of that process. Like, what did that mean for you? Did you have commissions that you had to turn off, or what was the?
No, in the old business we did, and that's why that was part of the factor into selling that business off. In the current one, no. So we didn't have any commissions at all.
Yep. So it was a fairly easy transfer, and I guess you were prepared and you knew what was coming when you sliced out the client base that you wanted to take with you.
Correct. Yeah.
That you could operate in their independent form.
Yeah, and there was a cost to that. There was some impact for that.
Is this a new apprenticeship phase that you had to go through? I mean, obviously you've been through the starting your own business before. You've learned a few lessons along the way. What did that do to your revenue?
It's a lot easier the second time. Our revenue was up for the year. If pro rata for where we were last year, we're up. And I think our forward projections are a lot more rosy than they were ever before. Which feels uncomfortable to say. Again, like that's not a huge focus for us, but as a business owner, it's really encouraging because that's also going to drive our growth. We have some pretty, growing growth plans that we have developing as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, PlanningSolo was the concept that you went out with, and obviously that transformation and helping people through a fairly difficult process or time in their life. But as you've been writing more and more blogs and more LinkedIn posts and information, you're getting quite a bit more inquiry just around the independents as well. So talk to us about the target market. Has that changed, or is it?
It's in the process of changing, I think. And that's been a bit of a shift for me. I'm a pretty stubborn person. Once I make a decision, I tend to stick to it. But yeah, we've been getting a growing number of inquiries for people looking for that independent advice side. They then look into the way that we work and what we're putting out there, and it's aligning with what they're looking for. But then they say to us, I'm horribly sorry, but we're happily married. Do you still help us? And yeah, of course we do. We turned away a few people, but I realized that the value for me in the work that we do with people going through divorce is having that impact on people. And there's behavioral things around that we can extend to other parts of life and other transitions people go through. And so that's what we're exploring at the moment.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. So you've created branding and marketing and ideas and concepts around a specific niche, and now you're sort of widening that to be. Would it be two niches, do you think, or is it?
This is the discussion we're having internally. I almost picture it as a matrix where on the horizontal we have the elements of our approach that bring value to people going through divorce. So, we're very empathetic. Trust is incredibly important to us. We see it as a real privilege. We're pretty humble about the way we go about things, simplicity, transparency. We've got those behavioral aspects, and I think they extend potentially across a number of verticals. And one of those verticals is helping people through divorce. The next one, an area that we're doing some work in is helping people with bereavement. So they've lost a loved one. What does that complexity look like, and how can we alleviate some of those stresses? So that's kind of the picture I have in mind of those verticals being the transitions that people go through. And I think our model of project work, limited engagements fits really well for that. If we can get them through that corridor and out the other side, then our work is likely to be done, and then we can revisit along the way. So that's kind of the picture I have in my mind. It is a work in progress. It feels weird de-niching almost. But I think we're still niching in a way because it's the way we approach the work it's the niche that we'll be focusing in rather than a specific technical area or transition.
Yep. And is that something that you're able to do, that you'll be doing as sort of a small practice solo, or are you looking at growing it?
Both. I think that barrister's model, I think it'll still be me primarily for the foreseeable future, and we'll just focus our practice around that. We'll focus heavily on admin support and technical support, so we can deliver that service as well as we can. But I can foresee a point in the medium term where we will have to grow. We will have to bring in other advisors. We will have to bring in other systems and support. And that's another point of stubbornness where I was very fixed on this barrister's sole operator idea. But to deliver what we want to the clients we want to help, I think I have to turn away from that. So that's been another point that I'll need to, mull over for the next few months.
Yeah, fantastic. It could be another merger on the cards. You never know. Could be going around in another circle.
I won't close any doors, but I don't see that one opening anytime soon. But maybe.
Yeah, fantastic. And just with your meeting process, you mentioned the project. Does that mean that you have no set meeting process? Well, after you've presented what it might be, it just completely depends.
Pretty much, yeah. So we are very structured at the start. So we'll have an initial phone call to work out if we're the people to help. Then an exploration meeting that takes 60 to 90 minutes where we go through our process, proposal discussion. Although what I've started doing now is recording a loom as we go through the proposal, and I find that's really helping clients get on board with things. So that's been really cool. And then we enter the advice or discovery phase, and that can look like, maybe we'll have a discovery meeting, maybe we'll do it all remotely, however, and then it is a bit more fluid after that.
Yep. Fantastic. And just, I probably just wanted to ask you this too before we go. You've spent a bit of money on a couple of business coaches that you've mentioned over the years, and Baz and Jim. Tell us about that investment and what tips would you give to people that are thinking about doing it?
So I have to say, I've been a strong follower of Jim, but I've never engaged him as a coach. Unfortunately, right. It's on the drawing board as well. Baz, the investment, I was pushed into that, to be completely honest. I was pretty skeptical. I don't need a life coach. I don't need a coach, yada, yada, yada. So Brian pushed me into doing that, and I can't quite remember the investment, but it wasn't insubstantial. But I've made it back 30, 40 times easily just from the shift in. It ultimately changed the direction of my life, which is pretty hard for a lifelong cynic to say. Yeah,
well, no longer a cynic. The non-traditionalist, we call you, the non-traditionalist. Hey, mate, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey and your story with the podcast audience. Really appreciate it. If someone wants to continue that conversation, what's the best way they can reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is really good. My email address is always there as well, Jordan, Jordan, @planningsolo.com.au. And my phone number is all over the internet as well. We've had a few discussions with advisors lately trying to navigate the divorce of their own clients. So more than happy to talk about that. And we're hoping to have some sort of how-to guide or some ideas around that out, hopefully by the end of the year.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. You actually work with other advisors who have got clients that you just take them through the project and then hand them back.
Yeah, lately it's just been a phone call. Just, here's some of the things to watch out for, keep an eye out on this, talk to this person, just trying to help people. Because it's hard for advisors as well when you have clients that divorce, particularly with all the uncertainty thrown up by the FACIA notes. Yep. So we encourage people to refer their clients out. We'll happily help, but also every advisor will know another advisor that their client can work with. Refer one party out to them, it keeps life a lot easier. But we're hoping to have a guide that sort of ticks off a few of those. Here's how to maybe look at doing that. Here's why SMSFs are a nightmare in divorce, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, fantastic. And if you're following your LinkedIn profile, then you'll probably see those pop up from time to time.
Yep.
Jordan, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Wish you all the success with how the business pans out in the future.
Thanks so much, Fraser. Really enjoyed that chat. Thank you.